How do you see that patient advocacy and patientships can ensure access to quality cord blood units in the
I,
in the
I
in the face of these challenges with the DEHP legislation?
I looked at the EU legislation around removing DEHP. It's called REACH, REACH. And the legislation is available online, and I scanned it for the keyword biobank, and I could not find the word biobank anywhere in the legislation. It seems to me that the entire law was conceived for activities going forward. It doesn't have any clauses anywhere to talk about the use of already preserved biologic specimens. And that is a problem that goes way beyond just cord blood. But speaking for our field, I think that we need to have a so-called call to action that everybody who cares about the use of cord blood for therapy should join. A group or a committee, whatever you want to call it, but we all need to come together and speak together to make it clear to the people who write these regulations that there needs to be an exemption for previously stored inventory in biobanks, that you cannot restore them. You can't thaw them and put them in new bags. They have to be used in the bags that they're already in, and there needs to be an exemption for them. And people who run banks, people who perform therapy with units in banks, patients who've been cured, everybody needs to make their voice heard.
Dr. Kurtzberg, what do you think is relevant to promote this issue and to bring alternatives to the legislators with a broad voice?
Well, first of all, I think what Fran just iterated is important. There are tens of thousands of patients who've been transplanted or infused with cryopreserved products, both cord blood and otherwise, who do not appear to have any untoward effects from exposure to the products that were stored in these bags. And there are bags in inventory that could be tested to show if there's any residual DHP even in these products. We don't know. So that's a simple, not necessarily inexpensive, but kind of experiment that could be done. Take units that are 30 years old, 25 years old, 20 years old, etc., and look and see if there's anything there to worry about. I think the clinical experience speaks for itself, and obviously there are a lot of competing risks for transplant patients that go beyond who knows what levels of DHP might be in the bag. But certainly there's no clinical signal that there's any toxicity caused by infusion of products that have been in these bags for the last 3 decades. And I think that kind of evidence has to be brought to the regulators. But I do think doing the experiments, and maybe all the banks would join together and do a cohort experiment looking at the older units. And if we don't find it, then we don't have to worry about it. I don't think we know the answer to that question yet. So I think cord blood has faced more challenges as a field than any other traditional sources of hematopoietic stem and progenitor cells. It's the only regulated product. As Fran mentioned in the beginning, it's easier to use a half-matched family member because they're there, it's not regulated, and the short-term outcomes may be superior to cord blood in the sense that you can get a lot of cells and they can graft faster. But I think that cord blood, if you look at long-term outcomes, and I'm a pediatrician, so I'm not worried about 10 years. I'm worried about 80 years. And when I look at long-term outcomes in my patients who are now 20 to 30 years out, I'm very pleased because they're doing well. They're functioning adults. They don't have chronic medical issues. And I think we need to maintain that optimism and really market that more. Let patients and transplanters know about more. I also think that the alternative uses of cord blood cells and birthing tissues in manufacturing immune effector cells and other cell therapy products is just at its infancy and is going to expand, and that we're going to see cells emerge as the new drug, if you will, and that cord blood will be at the forefront of that because we have GMP manufactured and cryopreserved inventories that can be used. So I'm optimistic, even though you probably would say I'm biased, but I think there's a lot of reason to see more use of cord blood in the next 5 years, and also to not reduce the amount of cord blood units that are banked these days.
Thank you, Dr. Werter.
To give an example of another field that has been dealing with a similar question, I found a 2018 paper in which doctors had treated very low birth weight infants, and they analyzed whether or not the exposure to, if I say this correctly, phthalates in the NICU had affected them neurologically. And it was not many years out. There was a limited timeline to this study, but they came to the conclusion that these infants had benefited more from the interventions in the NICU, where they received blood transfusions and other interventions using blood bags and IV tubing, that this had been more critical to their survival than any possible neurological impact from DEHP in the bags. And I think perhaps we need to make a similar argument that, for children who need a cord blood transplant to save their life, getting those cells is more important than any exposure to DEHP in the bags.
So I think there needs to be a broad, as you both emphasized, approach to this. Legislations in the EU and initiatives here in the US have a target date in 2030. We're in 2025 now. That may seem a way off, but we do all believe that this is the right time to spring into action